first decided I was going to make this video, it was supposed to be about looking at the holidays in Westeros and breaking them all down, comparing them to real life holidays. However, much to my surprise, there really seems to be a lack of holidays that we know about in Westeros, and the ones we do know of are also very vague in detail. Something that is important to consider about the concept of holidays in Westeros is that due to the seasons being highly irregular, impact on what people would be celebrating and when they would be doing so. Many of our real-world holidays are directly linked to the seasons. For example, Harvest Festival in the autumn used to be a huge deal in medieval Europe, with people's chances of surviving the winter directly linked to how bountiful a harvest is. Then, we also have Christmas. Christmas was originally a rituous pagan midwinter celebration of the brutal cold being half over. However, when these pagans converted to Christianity, they brought this midwinter celebration with them, and over time it became the Christmas that we know today. But when you have a summer lasting decades, you're not going to have a harvest festival each year, when crops are bountiful and you're harvesting them all year round. How would you celebrate a midwinter festival, such as Christmas, when you have no idea how long the winter is even going to last? However, we do learn from Marjorie Tyrell that they do have a harvest ball in Highgarden, which means some form of harvest festival is observed. There does also seem to be specific regional festivals that differ slightly from region to region. For example, in Winterfell, one of the main feasts we see in the books is another form of harvest festival which signals the coming of autumn. Almost all of the nobility left in the north, following Robb calling his banners heading south, turn up for a plentiful feast in Winterfell's Great Hall. While the Reach also has its own harvest festival, the way in which they are celebrated seems to be quite different, with the Highgarden approach seemingly being more like a ball, whereas the North's is a huge feast. In the South, there are more holidays that we would recognise in some way. It seems that each of the aspects of the Faith of the Seven seem to receive their own feast days and holiday. The one we see celebrated in the books is Maiden's Day, where Cersei attempts to get Marjorie arrested. We also have the Maiden's Day Ball in 133 AC, which was used to find a new queen for Aegon III after the death of Jaehaera. We also do have mentioned the Feast Day of Our Father, which was seen as an auspicious day of delivering justice. It's seen in Fire and Blood when the final executions and punishments for the Dance of the Dragons are dished out. However, much like a lot of the festivals and feast days, other than this one mention, there's very little ever mentioned about it other than this. Also in Fire and Blood, there's a brief mention of a Smith's Day, but that is also not really elaborated on much further. So, if we presume that each of the seven have their own day, you could expect each to have feasts and celebrations in a similar fashion. For example, let's speculate about the Day of the Stranger. It could be a day of remembrance for the dead, similar to the Day of the Dead in places such as Mexico. However, one thing to consider, if this is the case, it seems very odd such a day has not been mentioned in the books up until this point. The Seven Kingdoms seemingly also celebrates a New Year's Eve-like event. It's a night of drinking, debauchery and fun, not just for the highborn, but also the small folk as well, as they turn the calendar to another year. We don't actually know how they count the days to determine a year has passed. It could be something as simple as keeping a physical tally of the days, or perhaps moon phases, or positioning of the stars in the sky, which is what we used to do in ancient times. Seemingly, both of Aegon the Conqueror's coronations seem to be celebrated in some way. His initial landing and coronation seems to be marked by the royal family with a private family feast, with there being a larger celebration in Old Town that marks his second coronation. Again, details of this, much like the rest of the topic, do seem to be quite vague and we have very limited information about it. But building on this, it would seem logical that the anniversary of the coronation of the current king or queen would also be marked by some kind of celebration each year. If not each year, perhaps big milestones like we have done with jubilees for royalty in the real world. For traditional sorts of holidays, that's all we really know, but Westeros does seem to have other holiday-like events. For example, Namedays, at least for the highborn, seem to be celebrated with tourneys and feasts. An extension of that is how some people's coming of ages also appear to be celebrated, at least in terms of the royal family, that is. Betrothals and weddings are obviously big deals as well. The public spectacle of royal weddings in Westeros seems to be unmatched, except for perhaps a coronation. Think of events such as the Golden Wedding between Alyssa Velaryon and Rhaegar Baratheon, or the scale of the celebration for Joffrey and Marjorie's wedding as seen in the main books. These sorts of events seem to be treated a lot like a holiday. Tourneys in general seem to be held for many reasons. Births, marriages, name days, coronations, even events such as a Hand of the King being granted a position seem to be accompanied by feasts and tourneys, such is the case with Eddard Stark in the main books. In fact, when reading Fire and Blood, something that really stands out when you condense 150 years of history into one book is just how frequently they seem to happen. In a way, they seem to take the place of what we would see as public holidays in the real world, such as say Remembrance Sunday or May Day or a public bank holidays. While I do suspect that Westeros does have a vast array of different holidays, and probably could have some sort of version of all the real world ones, it seems to be something George R. R. Martin has not really explored that deeply yet in the books, in any real great depth other than the surface level concept for a few of them. And as a result, I think it's some of the weaker parts of the world building of A Song of Ice and Fire thus far. I do think as the world and lore expands with more spin-off TV shows, books such as Fire and Blood, New Dunk and Egg, and even The Winds of Winter, should it ever come, we might get a little bit more detail. I suspect given George R. R. Martin's love of world building, he does have ideas about how the holidays work. Perhaps even has written notes on it, but I think as of now there hasn't really been a need or reason to explore the concept much. However, I do hope in the future it's something we see expanded upon. In fact, there's a lot about different cultures in Westeros, and their background I still hope we learn more about.